That's
Gotta
right.
love it. He's going to become familiar at some point, there's no doubt about it. The entire world will, with a chat with Pat, and it is time for that right now.
Yes, and today our guest is, and I know, Dawn, I've had you on the Virtuous Life many times, and I still mess up your name. But I think it's Dawn Beutner. Did I say that right, Dawn?
That's the proper German pronunciation, yes. So that's fine.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, let me tell you about Dawn. She is amazing. She is an editor of a new book, All Things Are Possible, the Selected Writings of Mother Cabrini, which is, there was a movie out on her, so that'll be a great book. She's also the author of The Leaven of Saints, Bringing Christ into a Fallen World, and Saints Becoming an Image of Christ Every Day of the Year, also from Ignatius Press. And Dawn, I always just call her my saint lady. She's my go-to saint lady. So Dawn, I came across this article in Catholic World Report on someone moving towards sainthood that I had never heard of before. And she was a mother, a grandmother, somebody that, I think more of us should know about. And I'm going to let you say her name because I'll mess it up. And you tell us a little bit how you got interested in her.
Well, okay, so her name is Blessed Anna Maria Taigi, Taigi. I have to back up and say, so I'm an adult convert to the faith, and I sometimes wonder, why am I so crazy about the saints? But I feel like she's a great example of why the saints are so useful. Is like, as a new convert, many years ago, I had a hard time deciding, well, how am I going to live out my faith? Like, how can I be like Jesus when I'm not walking around the Sea of Galilee? I don't know any tax collectors. It just seems so different. So you look at the lives of the saints, and they lived ordinary lives. I guess they had family, they had difficult relatives, and Blessed Anna Maria Taigi is an excellent example of this premise that I have, which is the saints can help us become saints. So right. Blessed Anna Maria Taigi was born in Italy. She was married. She had 7 kids. And you think, it was an easy route for her to become a saint, and no, it wasn't. I mean, she had a conversion experience. I don't know how much time we have. Conversion experience. Her husband was kind of a cantankerous guy, but she learned how to, he learned from her, and she learned from him how to, deal with difficult people. And she's a great mystic. She's an amazing mystic. So that's a brief overview of her.
Yeah. And what I loved is, you talk in the article, and I encourage people to read this article, but you talk about, like, all these people who end up in her 2-little-room home. I thought that alone should make her a saint.
Oh, exactly. So she her father was a businessman, but his business went bankrupt, so they had to become domestic servants. They really went down in the world. Her parents really resented this. But she just accepted this as, she's a very devout woman. She accepted this. She became a servant in a palace, but just a servant. She married a man who was a butler in a palace. So their servant quarters was this tiny little room, and the bottom floor in the back of this palace, in the back of a palace, but still like a tiny little room. And they had they had 7 children. 2 died young. And then her mother, her mother needed a place to live, so she moved in. And then, these kids grew up and they got married. And then, these kids had kids, and her mother, one of her daughters was widowed and moved back in. So this tiny little room, we are so spoiled these days that she lived as as an ordinary mom.
Yeah, I love that about her. And the whole mystic experience is kind of interesting too, right? Because her husband testifies. Is it at her canonization process or the process that she's in right now? And he doesn't really know, like, her mystic experiences. He said he thought she was just thinking. So did she talk about these experiences that she had?
So it became pretty clear to people that she was a woman of great spiritual wisdom. That's why eventually bishops would come to her little humble house and ask for advice. Sometimes for the help of the Pope. I mean, people recognized that she had these spiritual experiences, but her husband, God bless him, he was a good Catholic and was a very good dad. But my reading of it is he's kind of like sick. He was not brilliant. So he just thought, sometimes they'd be praying the family rosary together, and she would just be silent. He thought, oh, she's just thinking. But her kids, they knew what was going on. they realized, and there was a priest who was closely associated with her, who I think they lived in a separate room down the hall. So he was really close to the family, and he realized what was going on, that she was not just thinking, that she would go into these spiritual ecstasies, and she'd be in God's in God's presence. But the big the thing, like I mentioned in the article, something I've never heard about from any other saint, is God gave her this globe, this golden globe would appear to her, and she would see future events in it, and past events. She'd see Jesus in his home in Nazareth with Mary and Joseph around him, and she'd see things going on in the world right now, and then she'd see things in the future which sound like she saw airplanes. She didn't know anything about that in the 1800s. So she saw these things, and you were like, why? Why would this? Well, I would say it was because she was a very devout woman, and God knew she could take it, that she could could see these things. These would not make her proud, but that she would use this information that she got to help other people. So she was sometimes able. It was a very tumultuous time in Italian history. She's often she's contemporary of Napoleon Bonaparte, who spread lots of wars during her lifetime.
Right.
So she was able to know what was going on and pray for these difficult situations, and that's, I believe, why God gave her this unique mystical experience.
And she also levitated, one of her kids saw her levitate while she was sweeping. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's one of my favorite stories ever. This little girl is sometimes this happens for some other saints too, that where moms are like, well, of course my mom did whatever. Doesn't every mom levitate? so this girl, at her mother's canonization, she said, I remember one time when I was a little girl, and I looked, and my mom was levitating in the air, and I said, Mom, there's no dust up there. What are you doing up there? so these are reliable witnesses. It's not, it's her own daughter, and with other witnesses recognized.
Yeah, and she's an incorruptible too, isn't she?
She is.
But she's not a saint yet. Do you know where she's at in the
not
process?
Not a saint yet. To my knowledge, she's still just a blessed, and so you can ask her to help you. And she needs a miracle. She is a great saint. She should be claimed a saint.
Oh, yeah. And Dawn, thanks so much. I could talk to you forever about her. I might have to have you on The Virtuous Life to talk more about her. Have a good week ahead, okay?
You too. Thanks so much, Pat.
All right. Take care, Dawn. Our guest, Dawn Beutner. Excuse me.
How
Rod,
delightful that, I'll tell you that, I love listening to that, and I love saints, obviously.